For our next lesson, we're going to learn how to write the equations of lines. In our previous lesson, we learned how to graph the equations. So in this particular set of videos, we're going to actually break this down into 4 possible scenarios that we could write the equation of a line, going from, I guess, easiest to, I don't want to say hardest, but a little bit more challenging with each step. And it really has more to do with that you have more steps to take for each progressive one. So what we're going to do, we have a little concept summary box here that should recap a lot of the things that you learned in Algebra 1. Slope-intercept form, point-slope form, and of course, when given 2 points, we have to find a slope. So we're going to use this concept summary box. We're going to refer back to it as we go through each example. So we'll start with example number 1. And you can see in example number 1, we are writing an equation with a given slope and a y-intercept. Now, this is probably the easiest, most straightforward version that we could use because we have a line that's in slope-intercept form where all we need to do is come up with the slope and come up with the y-intercept, and we can plug it straight into that form and we're basically done. So you can see we're given a graph here and we need to identify the y-intercept. And so I'm just going to put a little highlighter on the y-intercept. And then from there we just need to count until we get to another point on the line. And so you can see we can either count over and then up, or we could count up and then over. Either way, we're going to get 3 over 2. So now that we have 3 over 2 for the slope and 0, -1 for our y-intercept, we could just use the -1 portion of the y-intercept and plug it into our slope-intercept form, and then at that point we're done. So this is the first example of writing an equation of a line, and it's in the most basic form. So let's try that in a sample problem. Just go ahead and pause the video and work sample problem number 1. And we give you a lot more information in this graph, so it should be a little bit helpful for you. You didn't actually have to come up with it on your own. So go ahead and identify the appropriate parts and write the equation of this line in slope-intercept form. Okay, and so if we recall, slope-intercept form is mx plus b, and we're really just looking to replace these 2 parts. And so you can see here, it was somewhat given to us. We didn't really have to do a lot of work. In some cases, you're just going to be given the graph and not given all of the information the way we did here. But so if we plug all this in, we have -3/4 is our slope. It's very vitally important that you remember to plug that x in there. That x is part of this. And then the y-intercept, we're only going to take the y value, which is a 2. And so we now have this equation in slope-intercept form, and that's as far as we need to go. So that is our first example of writing the equation of a line. Again, if you ever have any questions, be sure to jot them down and then ask your teacher in class the next opportunity. For our next example of writing equations of lines, we're going to be given an actual slope, and then we're going to be given a point. Now, in this particular instance, our point is not going to be the y-intercept. It's going to be some random point that's on the line. And the first way that you'll be able to tell that is that it's not 0 and some number, which would represent the y-intercept. So you can see in example number 2, the point that was given to us was 2, 3. And then it had a slope of -1/2. Now, if you refer back to the concept summary box at the top of the notes, you can see that we're given a form of a line called the point-slope form. Now, this form of line is given to us specifically for this type of example. So you can see here in my example that we have a y and an x that are in black type, and they have no subscript. And the reason that I have it like that is because it's to remind you that you need the y and the x in the final equation. Then I give you a y1 and an x1 with the subscripts. We've put it in different colors here, and that is specifically to show you that that is the specific place where you're going to enter the information from the point. And so we can say that this 2 is our x1 and this 3 is our y1, and that is specifically what's going to be inputted into those 2 parts. And then last but not least, we have the m, which is in green in this particular instance, and that is our slope, and so we can directly replace our slope with that. Now, once you've done the basic substitution here, we've put in the 3, we've put in the 2, and then we've put in the negative 1/2, we're not completely finished. This needs to be simplified, which basically means we need to get y by itself, and we need to get it in slope-intercept form. And so we'll have to do a little work here. And so if we go down a little bit, we'll see the final part of this being simplified. And so we're going to take the negative 1/2 first, and we're going to distribute it. And then we're going to add 3 to both sides, and that gets us our final answer in slope-intercept form. So using that example and the point-slope form from the concept summary, go ahead and work sample problem number 2 for us. So hopefully you've had a chance to do that. It gives us 2 parts here. It tells us that we have an equation that passes through 1, 2, and I immediately recognize that as not being the y-intercept. And then it tells me I have a slope of 2. Now keep in mind that the slope is the same thing as m, and so that's m equals to 2. So I'm going to take my point slope form. I'm just going to rewrite it here so I can plug directly into it. Remember, one of the y's and one of the x's has to stay through to the final equation. So we're going to only input our information into the y1 and x1, and so I have y minus the y1, which in this case is 2, equals slope, which is also 2, times x minus x1, which is the 1. So I'm going to start this by distributing the 2, so I have 2x minus 2, and then finally I'm going to add 2 to both sides, leaving me negative 2 plus 2. Now the reason I wrote this extra step in here is because I want you to pay attention to what happens here. The negative 2 and the positive 2 actually cancel each other out, leaving us 2x plus 0. And so what that is that's a y-intercept that is at the origin. And so this is still in slope-intercept form, so it's been simplified all the way. However, we don't tend to write 0 in our equation, so our final answer simplified all the way will simply be y equals to 2x. Okay, and that's an example of using point-slope form to write the equation of a line.